Welcome to our webinar number 5, episode 5, where we're going to talk about all of the other apps that are out there, other tools and peripherals that you can use to enhance your tech stack. Just to get some housekeeping out of the way, we expect this to take 20 to 25 minutes, maybe 5 minutes with questions if anyone has any. Our panelists today will be myself. I'm Erin Vukolich with JCCS, Client Advisory Service Team Leader, and I'm located in the Whitefish office. And we have Brenda, who's been also hosting our other sessions, and she's our accounting and payroll team leader and works out of the Missoula office. And then we have brought Alana back. She's working out of our Kalispell office and is a senior accountant that works really extensively with all of the apps that we use and has some really good information for us today. As usual, we have our disclaimer. We try to be as accurate as possible. Today, we're talking about apps which constantly change. So we may reference something that what apps do now that may change in the future. So just be aware, we do try to stay as accurate as possible. So over the last several webinars, we've talked about the main applications that we use at JCCS. It's QuickBooks Online, Receipt Bank, and Accountants World Payroll Relief. But the world of apps doesn't just stop there. Today, we're going to talk about apps that can be added to your tech stack to assist with other efficiencies and accuracy. And we'll also be talking about some industry-specific apps. As we've discussed, the COVID pandemic has really made an impact on how people use technology in their day-to-day. And to give you an idea of how we used another app, to give you a real-life example, we had a client that we had moved on to an electronic accounts payable system that integrated with our tech stack so that we could pay the bills from wherever we are for the client, and also gave the client the chance to review those bills. When COVID hit, everything kind of grinded to a stop, except for our processes. We were able to continue paying bills. We were able to continue seeing things come in as they were an essential business and still staying open. So we were able to continue, not necessarily same as we were going because other vendors were closed, but we could make sure that we had everything covered with still staying safe and healthy. So it really gave us a lot of control and a lot of power when a very unexpected event came along. So that's my real life example. We'll be talking about a couple more throughout the webinar, but Brenda is going to get us started on discussing the why behind adding additional apps. You're muted, Brenda.
I got the message. Thank you. So whether you're using QuickBooks Online, Intacct, or any other software, it's really important to remember that none of the systems can do it all, or at least they can't do it all very well. So in the last episode, we talked about payroll and how we, as internally at JCCS, we looked elsewhere for a payroll module when we found that QuickBooks Online was a bit lacking in that area. So the same goes for the other areas of your business. It's really important to evaluate what is the best option for you and what is going to allow you to run your business efficiently from anywhere. Ease of access and proper reporting have become top priorities right now. One of the areas that we haven't talked about yet is the proper revenue and expense recognition. So what does that mean? Proper recognition. A lot of times we tend to think that just by recording the bank activity, we're capturing all the data we need and it should result in financials that we can rely on. It's definitely not the case. So we brought in Alana today to talk to us about this. She has a lot of experience with her clients in this area. We've both seen this method of accounting lead to some pretty serious errors in reporting and some fairly unreliable financials. Do you have a few examples you can share with us?
I do. I think the biggest issue with recording just off of your bank deposits is your cash versus accrual. Whether you report on cash versus accrual, if you're just recognizing income based on your bank deposits, you are by default recognizing cash basis of revenue. But we know we have a lot of clients that record accounts receivable, do their tax return on accrual basis. And so because of that, we can't just be booking income based on deposits that are coming into their bank. Something else to think about when we're looking at if we're just doing it based on bank deposits, you have the net versus gross receipts. I see this one quite a bit. If we're just booking income based on deposits into the bank, a lot of times that's flowing through your POS software and it's coming net of your merchant fees. So you would have your gross revenue less your merchant fees, and then we're recognizing that net amount as revenue. So this would understate your revenue, and then you're also understating your expenses when really you want to be recognizing the full amount of the revenue and then reducing that amount by the merchant fees in your accounting software. I see this a lot with clients that are invoicing their customers, especially if they're invoicing in QBO, they receive that net payment on the invoices, and then the client then gets a duplicated invoice for the merchant fees. So it causes that net versus gross receipts issue, and then it causes the invoice issue. And this is actually pretty common because I think people think, you know, it's like $30 here and there for the merchant fees, but when you're either paying a lot on merchant fees or when you have larger ticket invoices, those merchant fees can add up. If you're only recognizing the net revenue, you're also not able to look at how much you're paying in merchant fees, which I think is definitely a benefit just to recognize those fees so you can see based on the software what you're paying if you're getting your money out of it. And I think one of the third biggest thing is the transfer of information. When it's coming from the bank deposit, you still want to make sure that you're recognizing the revenue correctly and everything is integrated correctly. Because a lot of times you can have balances in your accounting software growing high based on your POS integration. You can have accounts that are just growing, and then other accounts that are going negative, and that you would have an issue with your integration there. So you may be recognizing the bank deposits coming in, but you have other accounts kind of going out of whack that really can cause your financials just to not give you the right information, and you won't have that real-time data.
Yeah, and when we're talking about that, we're really talking about their point of sale systems and that information coming in. We see that a lot. And I think it's important to note here that this is one of the biggest cleanup areas when we get QuickBooks files from a client. So, and it takes time to clean that up, and it takes time to investigate, especially if we're looking at 12 months worth of data. So it's definitely worth the investment of your time to look at that up front. Yeah. Did you have anything else to add before we move on, Alana?
I was just going to add, based on the gross versus net revenue as well, that can also play into your compliance forms, like your sales tax, lodging tax. If we're only recognizing that net coming in, then our compliance forms may be off because we should be paying tax on the gross revenue. But if we're just pulling the amount we have in our QuickBooks, which is your net, you may be shorting your taxes. So it kind of plays into a lot of other things, that revenue recognition that you'll do throughout your business cycle.
Yeah, it definitely does. I know we've seen that come up with a client that has been in an audit situation where they found out that their lodging tax was understated for a couple years. And it's not fun getting that bill after the fact. So when we are looking at the various applications here, it's really important to think about the outcome first. I think Alana just explained that very well as far as some of the negative outcomes that we can get when we don't think about that end piece in the beginning. So what type of reporting do we want, and what do we need to be tracking? There's a lot of variables at play when we look at that. Some of these may be your company size, the growth potential of your company, the users of the information, and even the audience. Who are you going to be sending these reports to, and what do they need to be looking at? But one of the biggest variables that I see is the industry that you're in. And I know that whenever I have a client that calls me up asking for a good application to put in place. That's not my forte. So I'm always picking up the phone and calling Erin or Alana. They're one of the firm's top, or they're two of the firm's top experts in this area. So I'm going to turn it over to them to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the different applications that are out there.
Great. So there are so many different applications that you can choose from. If you go to apps.com, which I believe it's apps.com, it's hosted by QuickBooks. There are so many choices. It can be extremely overwhelming. So like Brenda said, it's important to think about what you're looking for, what your needs are. So our things that we're looking at here, we have revenue management. Are you looking for something just to manage the revenue? As we've discussed in previous webinars, you want to look for something that's going to fit you. QBO may be able to resolve some of those issues, but you want to find the best thing that's going to fit you the best, that's going to integrate with your current processes, so you aren't creating a ton of new work for yourself. So we've got some revenue management solutions. You're looking at point of sale systems, recurring revenue recognition if you are doing subscription-based programmings or software as a service. You might have receivables management if you really have some pretty extensive receivables processes. We'll also talk a little bit about expense management, which is your payables, whether you're doing domestic or international payments, and then those subsequent compliance forms. We're talking about 1099, sales tax, 1042S, a lot of fun numbers, but pretty great. And then we'll also discuss some other apps regarding mileage and expense reports. But first, Alana, what do you have to add about revenue management apps?
When you're looking at revenue management apps, I think it's important, like you guys said, to look at the end users, who's going to be using the data, and then also you as a client and as a business, what do you need out of the revenue management? If you're in lodging, you would need to file your lodging tax, but then are we also capturing what you want to look at? You know, do you want to see rooms? Do you also have a cafe there? You want to figure out what you want to be reporting on. There's so many apps out there. And so if you start to narrow down your needs and what you need to be reporting on, that really does help you kind of slim down your choices and figure out which one is best for you, because it can be overwhelming in the beginning. We have some examples, like if you're a restaurant, some good ones are your Toast and Upserve. I think both are really robust. Toast, you're able to do a lot of labor and scheduling in there, which I think is really nice for a lot of restaurants. If you're doing like event planning, or here I know in Kalispell, we have a lot of like snowmobile places that rent snowmobiles, boat rentals. A good one is a point of rental. That one also captures an inventory side, which is really nice to have. You can use Shopify for any e-commerce you have. If you have e-commerce, you also really want to find a really strong compliance application, because most likely you're going to have many states involved selling online. For any rental management and tenant softwares, you have RealPage and OneSite. And then for your nonprofits, for the donor software, there's Bloomerang and Donor Perfect. I think Donor Perfect here in Kalispell especially, I know a lot of nonprofits are using that. So those are just some that we have in our back pocket, that when we have those industries, we like to see if those fit. And then if not, we kind of narrow down what else is needed for other apps.
Great. I think revenue recognition is often an overlooked area. People will find an app or they'll have one recommended to them, and they'll just start using it without actually really looking at what it's doing and how it can help them, and rather than digging deep and finding the app that's going to be best for them. So moving on to expense management, I think expense management for us, or that we see, is probably the easiest area to add in process improvement and increase efficiency and accuracy and remove a lot of manual processes. It's a pretty new age of technology. It's exciting to see that we're moving away from the data entry of keying in all the bills, recording all the payments, printing off the checks, stuffing them with a copy of the invoice in an envelope and mailing it. That's a lot of time. So in our previous episode, we talked about Receipt Bank and explored the benefits of receipt capture and the integration with QBO and that whole text recognition process. But I know that there are a lot of other applications out there that can help with the actual payment process. Alana, what do you think?
I totally agree. For me, expense management is by far one of my favorite things to do with clients, just because I think it's a place, like you said, that you can add a lot of efficiency, but you can really, I think you can help the internal team. A lot of times somebody spends so much of their time typing in the bills and coding them, when if we can just automate it, they're able to take a step back and have more of a review approach. And I feel like we get a lot of success with this, just because it makes everyone's day so much better once we get these systems up and running. I've seen a lot of success with bill payment systems like Melio and Bill.com. Melio is built into QBO, which is really nice. And I feel like it just makes your day so much better. You don't have to stuff the checks, print them, all of that. There's still your security involved, but you're able just to pay online, which is really great. Bill.com, like I said, and then you also have Veeam if you're doing international payments. Like Erin mentioned, especially here in Kalispell, we do have some individuals from Canada who come down, or we sell across the border. Especially, we have a couple of restaurants really close to the border who sell back and forth. So having that international payment ability is really important. So if you need that, definitely pick one that allows for that. I've had a couple clients that they get their US all set up with an online payment system, and then we didn't take into account the international side. And so now we're doing those things manually. So it's nice just to have your whole revenue stream, if possible, integrated into one application is really nice. When we're talking about inventory in the expense management, one thing that I really like to do is look at how we're managing the revenue and the point of sale system. A lot of times, if you get a good POS system, it includes a matching inventory area with it so that you can match that revenue and inventory, and then you're not trying to track your inventory outside of the system. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. If your revenue management system doesn't have inventory, some good ones are like SOS Inventory and Fishbowl for manufacturing. There's a lot out there. So like I said, definitely go look. And then as far as compliance forms, like I said, I feel like that area is just getting more complex and feels like it's growing with all of the different, with all the kind of legislation and everything involved. I really like Avalara for compliance. It allows, they kind of have two areas. Either you can send it off to Avalara and they can manage all of your compliance besides the tax return, or they did just come out with a small business module where you can kind of self-manage that compliance area. And then there's also TaxJar for compliance forms.
Great. That compliance is such a headache that if you can use an application like Avalara or TaxJar, and there's a couple others out there that can really take that headache out of the picture. That court case was settled. I don't remember the year, but it was a Wayfair, and it happened in North Dakota. And now there's a lot more compliance if you're doing any e-commerce or selling across state lines. So definitely something to think about if you are making sales outside of your home state. So thanks for expanding on those. Now, one thing I did want to mention when you were talking about payables, I think one other area that we don't necessarily think about that often, specifically addressing nonprofits, is that dual signature that is often needed on the expense management. And when you have a system like Melio or Bill.com or Veeam or these cloud-based systems, it really enhances the ability to do a dual control within the system. So you know that you're still having the transparency that you need as a nonprofit or even as a for-profit, but with multiple managing people. you know that you're still getting all of the approvals that you should. It's all recorded, it's fully auditable, and everything's getting paid on time. So having to wait for someone who might be out of town to come back into town to sign a check, and then it has to go to another person to sign. So it can really, really streamline that payables process. So that was one area that I absolutely have loved in the expense payables management. So now kind of switching gears to talk about other apps that are maybe not specifically about payments or revenue. Alana, what are your other apps that you like and what they can do for our clients?
For mileage, I really like to use MileIQ. That's kind of a baseline I recommend to everyone just to get started. That one's free, I know, up to a limit. I think it might be over 40 trips, then you have to start to pay with it. But for a lot of businesses who are just beginning, especially ones who don't think that they'll be able to keep the mileage log written, the MileIQ is an easy one just to have on your phone and code your trips to have at year end, and then to have your records in case you needed them for an audit or anything. If there's a business with a large fleet of vehicles, even like construction or delivery where there's a lot of people traveling day to day, TripLog is a really good application. But I recommend that for the larger fleet vehicles because there is no free version for it. As far as employee expense reports, I'm a big fan of the Receipt Bank expense reports, but I also really like Expensify. I know that we use that even internally, which is really nice. It's basically the same premise as Receipt Bank, just snap a picture and essentially submit it once everything's set up. So it's pretty nice. And then when you're thinking about other apps, you do want to think about your year end, like 1099s. We use Track 1099, although it's a good system. It's good for a large volume of 1099s. So if you just have your normal one or two businesses and you just have a couple of 1099s, I do think QBO is still a really, really good way to go for 1099s. But I have noticed a lot of payroll softwares are also allowing you to create your 1099s. So definitely take a look at your payroll system to see if you can print your 1099s out of there.
Fantastic. I would also mention for mileage, QBO, if you are using the QBO app now, you can also track your mileage in that. Originally, that was only in the self-employed version of QuickBooks Online, but they have pushed it out to all the other versions as well. I don't think it's necessarily as great as MileIQ as far as some of the automatic tracking that MileIQ can do. But it can definitely work, and it does have some automatic tracking for you. So definitely there's a lot of apps out there. We've only touched on a couple. It feels like we've been talking for about 25 minutes, so we've touched on a lot. Brenda, did you have any other specific apps you wanted to mention or industries that you've seen that have had really good success with apps?
I don't. I think you guys really covered the good ones there. No.
I would say I think there's one other area that we didn't mention specifically that I think really affects especially our clients right now with Montana property exploding and all the building exploding. Job costing is probably one of the areas that QuickBooks Online is getting better at, but still cannot do probably as powerful as people need. And there are quite a few apps out there that can do that for you, that integrate directly with QBO. The biggest one that I see is Buildertrend out there, and it does some great reporting. There's a lot of them that can fit your need. If you're a landscaping company, there will be an app for landscaping companies, for plumbers, for construction. So if there's any apps out there that you're wondering about or just want to review about, we can definitely assist. I think that's something that we've been doing more and more frequently as people are moving to the cloud. They're looking for just a second pair of eyes to say, is this a good fit? Is this not a great fit? Brenda, I know you did that with the time tracking software.
Yeah.
So we can definitely assist in that evaluation. Sometimes you just need that unrelated party who's not biased one way or another on an app to give an evaluation. And also with our history of talking to developers, we usually know the right kinds of questions to ask to get the right answers that we want from the developers, as opposed to just talking to some salespeople. So Alana, Brenda, anything else to add on our apps or other peripherals?
I would just add on to what you were just speaking about, as far as once you have it narrowed down to a few applications that you're looking at, or maybe your top 2, schedule a demo. And that's a really good time to pull somebody in that you work with at an accounting firm, because they're going to definitely have some good feedback, some good questions. In the timekeeping one that I assisted on, that's when all the good questions came out, was when we were looking at the demo together. So that would be my suggestion there.
Fantastic. Alana, any additional thoughts?
I was just going to say, a lot of times too, when I'm doing the demos, I also ask what it can't do. And I know that seems like a really open question, but it's nice just to hear from the developer, or I know I even ask Erin this sometimes from her experience, what can the app not do, so that we can find out, well, shoot, we really need it to be able to do that. That one might be off our list. So just nice to know what people wish it could do, and then to see if you need that, or if it covers everything else that you need, and if it's still a good option for you.
Fantastic. Thanks. So we've talked about the why behind changing anything, looking at your information. We did that in our very first episode with Tony and Drew. Then we looked at tech stacks and how you evaluate your tech stack and how you identify what should be in your tech stack. Then we talked about QuickBooks Desktop, QBO, the differences, the benefits of moving to the cloud, but also some of the restrictions that come with that. Last episode, we talked all about payroll and how you can really leverage your payroll information to both improve the employee experience and also improve your own management of your employees. And then today, we talked about all the other apps that are out there, and there are so many. It's incredibly overwhelming, and we could probably spend hours talking about each individual one that we'd like to use. So adding that all up, for our next webinar, we're going to be talking about what that looks like. When you have all of these systems that are working together and integrating correctly and pulling all the information in, what do you do with it? How do you get it to that next step where you can start making decisions based on that information? Tony and Drew will be coming back. They're going to be our panelists again to bring us full circle back to our very first webinar. So please keep an eye out for that registration link. We'll make sure that that goes out about a week ahead of time. We're planning it for December 3rd, which is 2 Tuesdays from now, so after the Thanksgiving holiday. And I think we're on to our final thoughts. We don't have any Q&A, so I think we're good. Alana, it looks like you have some notes here. Anything you want to add, or did you already list it out?
I think I pretty much covered it. I was just my final thought was just make sure you identify your needs. I think that's like numero uno of what you want to do before picking your apps. Identify what you need to external users as far as compliance and reporting, and then identify what you need for yourself as the business owner and your management team. And then that will really help define what type of applications you need.
Fantastic. Brenda, any other final thoughts?
I think the only thing I would add is, as you're doing those demos and vetting out your application, to get some references and speak with them about, like Alana said, what can they not do? What have you ran into? So.
Fantastic. I would echo both of those. I think Alana's right. You need to think about what your needs and wants are. Also, don't just be thinking in the immediate. Think about 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. What are your needs going to be then? Or what do you want your needs to be then? So that you can start preparing yourself for where you want to go. So that's it. We're at 30 minutes right on the dot. We actually extended that content a little bit further. So thank you all for joining us. If you have any additional questions or want to talk further about this, please reach out to any of us on the webinar today or your person that you work with at JCCS. I think all three of us are pretty passionate about this area and always looking to talk to people about technology and how they can make their lives a little bit easier or get more information out of their information or out of their data. So thanks again for joining us, and hope everyone has a great day.